baby, back at it again with the trade rumors and the ideas. Let's talk about two fan bases that absolutely hate each other. The Vancouver Canucks fan base and the Toronto Maple Leafs fan base. Now, these two teams, these two fan bases are in pretty different territories, if I do say so myself, especially coming from a guy who lives here in Vancouver and who has seen the social media meltdown of Toronto Maple Leafs fans. It's kind of interesting because Vancouver is in a weird spot where their coaches, their personnel are really trying to get the fans excited again. And I said in my previous video, talking about how I'm a sucker, that I'm an absolute sucker because I'm falling for it and I'm getting really excited. And I think a lot of people are getting excited as well. It's just kind of, debatable whether or not we'll be redeemed in our beliefs over here. Redeemed verbatim, as they say. But for Toronto fans, the conversation is a lot different than Vancouver. Toronto fans, it's all, okay, what the heck are we gonna do? Who are we gonna get back? Who's staying on this team? Where do we go from here? Do we trade Marner? Do we do this? Do we do that? We were so good in the regular season. We sucked in the playoffs. Okay, we didn't suck, but we blew the lead, and that's even worse. Okay, what do we do now? Let's go over onto some hypothetical trade ideas, especially the ones that I think are pretty interesting to talk about. Let's go over onto the province, where Ben Kuzma has our little idea here. He posted this article a few days ago. The Canucks, Brandon Sutter, and Alex Kerfoot could help solve riddles in the middle. This article is talking about Toronto Maple Leafs forward Alex Kerfoot, and whether or not the Vancouver Canucks should, would, or could make a trade for this guy. Now, before we even get into the article here, let's just give off a brief summary for those who are unaware. Alex Kerfoot was one of the best Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs this season. He had 6 points in 7 games played. Really good for him. William Nylander was also great too. Where the heck was Marner and Matthews with their production over here? That's another question for another day. But Alex Kerfoot, we all kind of know this guy. He was from Vancouver, BC. He's 26 years old. He's signed for $3.5 million a season until 2023. The big question with Kerfoot is whether or not this guy is going to get claimed by Seattle, because at his core, he is a very guaranteed 30-ish point guy at the NHL level. I mean, he had 28 points in 2019-20 and 23 points in 2020-2021 this year, but those were in fewer amounts of games played. He is pretty much supposed to be 10, 15 goal guy, 30 point guy-ish, who produced a little bit better with Colorado in his earlier years, but he's in a position where you don't really know where you're going to go with this guy into the next few seasons. Heading over onto the province, this is what Kuzma writes about Kerfoot. He has indeed been on the Canucks' radar before. In fact, the headline right here is a quote from Kerfoot himself on how the Canucks used to be interested in him. I had a good meeting with the Canucks, Linden, Travis Green, and Jim Benning, and I was impressed. But at the end of the day, Colorado offered more opportunity, and it was hard to turn them down. This is back when Kerfoot was a college free agent. He was really good for the Harvard University Crimson. He was their captain in 2016-17, and then he went to Colorado the next season, putting up 40 points. Going back to the article here, the Toronto Maple Leafs are not expected to protect the center for the Seattle Kraken Expansion Draft. The cap-strapped club needs to sign their first-line UFA winger Zach Hyman. He's going to get himself a payday, and the Leafs cannot afford to lose him to free agency. They also cannot take on salary in a possible Kerfoot deal, but may be persuaded to take a draft pick or a prospect. And if the Vancouver Canucks truly believe they're 2 years shy of being a competitive force, this is worth a kick of the trade tires. The article then talks about how Kerfoot was approached by Vancouver back when he was a free agent and how he turned them down for Colorado. And so now, you think about it, and you think about the Vancouver Canucks and their forward core, you say, okay, who do we have in our top 9 next season? Assuming everybody's healthy and assuming all the names that we want to be available are available. First line, Lotto 649? I don't know. There's a lot of debate as to whether or not JT Miller will be the team's third-line center in the next few months, but I mean, hey, for the sake of argument, let's just say Lotto line, first line. Okay, good, got it. Second line, who do we have there? We have Niels Höglander, he's great. We have Bo Horvat, that guy's great too. We also have a brand new guy in Vasily Podkolzin, which sounds like a very good player to have in the lineup too. Now for the third line. Things get a little bit interesting here because we're going to have Tanner Pearson. Kind of have to have him here. He was signed to that contract extension, and he's a pretty capable player as well. Who's our third line center? I mean, is it Brandon Sutter? Is it Jay Beagle? Is it Tyler Grayovac? I don't know. And then for our third line right winger, is it Jace Howerluck? Is it Cole Lind? Is it Highmore? Yeah, things start to crumble away a little bit in terms of the certainty when you get to the top 9, or at least the trailing part of the top 9. Alex Kerfoot, to me, just based off of what I saw in the playoffs and what I know this guy is capable of doing after watching all those gosh darn Toronto games this year, I'd have Kerfoot over Sutter any day of the week. And if you're talking about Jay Beagle, oh boy, same could be said tenfold about him. We could say the Vancouver Canucks head into the 2021 season with a center core of Pettersson, Horvat, and then you have Sutter and Beagle. Maybe you have Miller move down to the third line center, you shuffle around a little bit of other things, and you have a first line with some rookies on it, I don't know. Things get a little bit wonky. Which is why this article that Kuzma writes is even being proposed, talking about Sutter and the injuries and Alex Kerfoot, maybe if he's even an option there, which is why I think it would make sense for both sides if you go out there and do this. Firstly, for Vancouver, if you really do believe, as Kuzma writes, that you're going to be a contender in 2 years, who cares about the prospect you drafted this year? Who cares about the guy you just acquired in the 2020 draft? That guy's not going to help out your team till 2024, 2025, 2026 maybe. So you trade away that asset, you trade away another pick or whatever, maybe a third and a B, C tier prospect for a guy who can come in making $3.5 million. That's not expensive. That's less than Sutter, for crying out loud. And you plop him there in your third line spot. Maybe even play him as a top 6 winger. Who knows? Because this guy has proven that he can produce more than the guys that you already have. And I know, I don't want to see any comments saying, oh, like we have to sign PD and Hughes first. Yeah, I know they have to do that. Assume they do that. I would assume they do that. I don't think they're not going to sign PD or Hughes. 3.5 is still pretty cheap, and I'd rather have the Canucks make a trade for Kerfoot rather than make a big free agent acquisition, because you know Jim Benning loves to do those. For Toronto, though, why would they do this? Well, because it's already mentioned, man, Toronto might lose Kerfoot to Seattle anyway. If you do this move, not only do you still lose Kerfoot, but you get at the very least an asset or two coming back. And I think that's really valuable if you're taking a look at who you have and the way you manage your assets. Would you rather have one outcome with no assets to show for it, or the same outcome with assets involved? If this is something that Jim Benning wants to explore, I honestly would be all for it, and I think the Toronto Maple Leafs would be as well. It just makes a little bit more sense because Kerfoot is from Vancouver, and there was extended interest with the Canucks and Kerfoot back when he was a free agent all those years ago. This trade doesn't necessarily improve the Toronto Maple Leafs in any way. In fact, it probably makes them worse because I like Kerfoot and I think he's a pretty alright player, but still, you know this guy is probably one of the more likely candidates to maybe being taken by Seattle in the first place, which is why this conversation gets really, really muddy. So for this article over here, Ben Kuzma writing about Sutter, who is an expiring free agent. He might get re-signed, who knows? I think he probably will be, to be honest. Just hopefully for cheaper, right? But yeah, this article goes over Sutter as well as Alex Kerfoot as well. Go ahead and read the article. Kuzma does a great job laying out the points here. Also giving a little bit of a spotlight on that JT Miller to the third line idea that has been thrown around there all over Twitter. So talk to me in the comments if you're a Canucks fan. Would you make this kind of move? Would you trade, I don't know, just pulling a few names? Not that I would want to trade these guys, but the fact is you might have to. Would you trade a Yoni Yurmo and a third-round pick, or Yoni Yurmo and a second for Alex Kerfoot? I don't know if I would because I love Yoni Yurmo, but realistically, we don't know how good Yoni Yurmo is going to be. He's just a random third-round prospect that I'm calling out of thin air here just to make a point. So, talk to me in the comments, would you make a trade like that of value for value? If you're a Leafs fan, would you want to do this? Because I know you guys are very unconfident you're going to have Kerfoot on your team next year anyway. Just let me know in the comments what you would want to receive for this kind of player. Obviously, you can't get any salary back. So, talk to me in the comments what you think. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.